All right, welcome to the SnoWest podcast. I'm Ryan Harris. Today's a fun show. It's actually still January, but you're not listening to this until it's got to be March 6th, right?
Yeah.
That's the Polaris embargo.
Yeah, hopefully.
So we wanted to get together and film this show. We have SnoWest test riders Justin Stevens, been with us for a while, and Rhett Clark, been with us for a long, long time, helping us ride sleds and take pictures and do all the fun stuff that we do on these kinds of things. But we just last week rode the 2024 Polarises.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's January, but you're listening to this in March 6th. So, long time ago, we rode the Polarises, I guess is what we'll say.
Yeah.
But we wanted to get together and shoot a podcast episode just talking about the 24 Polarises because they've done some fun stuff. You know, I wasn't expecting much of a change,
Right.
especially with, Marty Sampson retired. He was the kind of longtime Polaris RMK engineer from way back, like way back in the Edge days and before that. Interesting note about Marty, I think he was like the last engineer that did not have like an MBA degree. Like he started as a test rider and worked his way up and became like head of engineering for Polaris. So anyway, he had retired, and the 2023 RMK lineup was kind of his last hurrah, and he got to pick the colors and just had a lot of influence over the 9R.
That's cool.
But he's gone. And then that hands off to the new development team. RMK is just in different hands, not new hands, because Josh Mickelson and these guys have been around for quite a while on the RMK team, but they're kind of on their own now. And so I wasn't expecting a lot, and generally the pattern is you develop 3 years out. So what they've been working on now, they've been working on for a while. But again, man, they've come up with a lot of new stuff recently. The 9R the last year, the Patriot Boost before that, Matrix chassis before. I don't know. It's a lot of stuff. So anyway, little background on you guys. So Rhett, you've ridden with SnoWest and you've gone to snowshoot and gone to these new model releases. You've been over to Polaris's facility in Wyoming that we go over and test in.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of ridden that stuff with Marty, with Lyle Dahlgren, with some of the old engineering guys. Been on snowshoot, and you've owned everything, right? You've owned.
Yeah.
You had a Pro RMK. You've had several Arctic Cats, a couple Skidoos, a lot of Polarises.
Yep.
So.
I've been on them all since I was a young kid. I've had about everything. I've even got a Yamaha SX 700 that's sitting in my backyard. Because I like the sound of a triple.
But did you have a VMAX?
I didn't have a VMAX.
And then Justin, you've filled in and helped us out quite a bit, especially in the last few years. Been coming to snowshoot. Industry guy though, you did quite a few years with Motorfist.
Yeah.
So what was your role at Motorfist?
I was the marketing director for Motorfist, so I ran all the marketing efforts there, a lot of the videos and photos and stuff. I worked with my team, Taylor Fisk and some of the others that we worked with sponsored riders, had a few different roles, but it was a lot of fun.
You were there back in the day, when we were putting together the R&D deal, and Rob and Dave were just like the hottest show on snow,
Yeah,
or whatever you would call it. So you would go out and ride with those two guys and just all sorts of adventures with Rob and Dave and anybody else in Motorfist. And I think you were instrumental in building Motorfist up into the brand as big as it got right before everything sold to Arctic Cat. But man, we talked about that last week, even just how close Motorfist was to just exploding on the scene and just taking a big chunk of market share.
Yeah,
I think. Anyway.
I'd like to think that we had something to do with it. I mean, we made a pretty big effort to capture what we could with Rob and Dave, and of course, props to them. I mean, they were fun and interesting and funny and just fun to watch, and so they made my job pretty easy. So.
Yeah, definitely. And man, you can have a lot of fun when you're doing that.
Yeah.
Rob and Dave bring a big personality to the market. Whatever brand they're sponsored by, people are drawn to those guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the ride. We showed up. What was it, last Thursday, right? Rolled into Afton, and the media event is always at the tail end of their catalog and brochure photo shoot. So Todd Williams is there. Con Yongi was there. Brett Turcotte was there. Who else was there?
I think
Kind of on their way out.
Gabriel.
Dan had been there.
Dan must have been. He came up on my GPS. There was saying there.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure Sane was there shooting.
Gabriel.
Yeah, Gabrielle. They were headed out, so they had been riding all week. So we kind of show up at the end of that, and obviously they don't trust media as well as they trust their own guys, or we would be at the front end of that group.
Right.
But rightly so, right? Because
Right.
we did take out a couple parts, but that's no big deal.
Justin.
Whoops.
But the snow was surprisingly good. Like we had really good snow.
Yeah, it was really good.
Like
I mean,
we
that
went and did
was-
that event last year. Did you come on that ride last year?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. So last year we rode the same. Well, we were in a different area, but the same general area. And just last year was an overall bad snow year, just not very deep. And
Yeah.
this was a lot better. And it's a good thing because what we rode needed deep snow
Yeah.
to really see what it did.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know how well that would have done on like marginal conditions like we had last year, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Below 50.
Would have been hard to beat those conditions. Lots of snow, new snow, and then lots of traction underneath. So made it a lot of fun.
yeah. So the big news for Polaris' 2024 lineup is obviously the 3 1/4 inch track, the Series 9 325 track. Available only in 2 track lengths, 155 and 165. They've gotten rid of the 286 pitch altogether. There's no 3-inch track. I believe there's no 2.6 track. So it's just the 275, which is also a 3.5 inch pitch, and the 325 track, which is a 3.5 inch pitch. And that, I think the main obviously the main reason they did that was traction, flotation, and drive. But another reason that they went that route is to streamline the supply chain problems that the manufacturers have been having the last couple of years. You know, when they hit on Nails hit on the fact that previously they've had 21 different rear suspension configurations in the RMK lineup between different track pitches, track lengths. Khaos and Pro had 2 different rail profiles
Yeah.
up until 2024. Now they share the same rail profile. Went back to doing that, so it kind of homologates a lot of stuff. But first things first, though, what did you guys think on that 325 track? What's the first impression of that thing?
When we walked into the shop to go look at the 2024 sleds, it's the first thing I noticed. I turned to Justin and I said, that track looks different. Those lugs are tall. Do you think they look tall? And then
We're trying to figure it out. I mean, we're looking at it and you're like, I think so, but
Like
really?
those
Did they go
lugs.
taller? I mean, you know. it
like
was-
they just look tall. And then once they introduced it to us and started talking, that's one of the first things they touched on. And Justin and I looked at each other like, yeah, those are pretty big. So
Yeah, so, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one of my first impressions. I mean, I had I think it was my 2016 that had a 3-inch track, and I know there were some issues with some of that, and I remember that was probably my first thought. I thought, oh boy, here we go, bigger, because I have to admit that wasn't my favorite, and since then I've kind of gone toward the shorter tracks, just trying to maintain what I thought was a little bit better performance than snow, But so maybe I was a little skeptical once they explained it to us. I mean, I was like, okay, I get what they're going for and the thought process behind it, and of course then we got out on snow, and that was awesome.
It's interesting though. You know, we went from 155 being the all-around track, and then it got longer, and then they went all the way to 174, 175.
Yeah,
Skidoo still offers a 175, but Polaris no longer does the 174.
yeah,
They've never done a 174 on the Matrix chassis, so it's kind of been gone for a couple years now. But now it's coming back to 163, 155. But if you look around, you see a lot more people riding 155s than you used to.
yeah.
It was kind of 165, 163 was the sweet spot, and now everybody's kind of going shorter again. Why do you guys think that is?
I don't know. Maybe it's funny you say that. I was just down at the Polaris dealer and I overheard the salesman saying, "Yeah, the 155 is the more popular length." I just thought that was kind of interesting hearing him, because I guess I've kind of always been in that 160 range for the track length, a little bit longer. I've never been a huge fan of the 170. I guess I don't have a a use for that much track length. But I think people like it. There's the playfulness of it. We spend a lot more time in the trees, a lot less time bombing up a steep hill climb, and so I think in those situations it performs a little bit better and makes the sled just a little bit more maneuverable. So
I agree. It's probably just the play fun factor of it. Maybe it's, the popularity of the 146 that a lot of pro riders are playing on, and people see that and they don't want to commit to 146, so maybe 155 is kind of a balance of that. It's still playful, but still can perform on the mountain. That I think when you're riding that 155 versus 165, there's not a huge difference. 65 has more flotation and it might climb a little better, but when it gets stuck, it's harder to get unstuck. It's not as playful feeling. It's a little bit longer turn radius. You can side hill better on the longer track, and then you can do the same thing on 155, but your foot placement, things like that change. It's fun to jump from one to another, and it's made you kind of change your riding style a little bit. I think I hesitate a little more on a 155 if you're going to turn uphill or cut some high side hill, versus a 165 that it's a little more forgiving. I think the 155 is just more playful. I think you're right there.
well, and of course we were on all 9Rs and boosts, so
Yeah.
so a 155, that 3.3 1/4 inch track and that extra power. I mean, I didn't feel like there was anything we couldn't do on either sled. So the 155 didn't seem like it was lacking at all.
Well, so the 325 track, the 3 1/4 inch lug track, that to me, it's more than just like, Polaris is talking about. It's more lift and it's more propulsion, but it's more than that. Like it changes. So let's take the sled you're talking about, a 155 Khaos boost with the 3 1/4 inch track, affectionately known as Cardi B.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a wild machine, but it changed the dynamic of riding that thing. To me, it felt like last year we spent a lot of time on the 9R 146, and that was a wild ride.
Yeah.
Because you can drop, instead of standing the front end up, you can drop the bottom end into the snow more, and so you can rotate the sled while you're deeper in the snow.
Right.
And the 155 with the 3 1/4 has that feeling, but at the same time, it's more propulsion.
Yeah.
Because it's just
You're
hooking
still
up
moving forward.
and throwing you. And part of the time, I'm sitting there riding this thing and just trying to figure out, okay, what am I feeling? And half of it is this is harder to ride because I'm hanging on more, because it's just constantly up and down. Like
Yeah.
I can make that thing stand up or try to get it to settle down. But it was just such a wild ride. It was more of a physical upper body workout, just because you're hanging on, because the front end is so lively. Like it'll come up and stand up way easy, much like a 146 with the deep lug track did.
Yeah. Well, and I was glad that they had a 2.75 sled there, because it was nice to be able to get on that and then go back to the 3.25. And part of that, like I said, you come into it a little skeptical. I mean, anytime anybody does something, sometimes you wonder, does this actually make a difference, or is this just so that they can put 3.25 and it sounds better and everybody has to have it, but it really did make a difference. And I mean, you notice it right away. I think you notice it coming up out of the snow, and like you said, in the snow conditions we were in, I'd say it wasn't hard to ride in, because of course it's deep snow, but it, man, that they moved, and I think you could feel the difference in that track, as much as it seems like that that little bit of difference wouldn't make that big of a difference, but it ran well.
It seemed to me like you put that taller track lug on a 165 and it handles and feels like a 155. Like a deeper lug track made the whole sled feel shorter, because it's not losing any drive by spinning through the snow, like it's hooking up and going. But that just makes it more responsive, and if you're ready for it, that's good. If you're not ready for it, you're gonna be correcting your weight position and rider position a lot during the ride.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you rode farther forward on those sleds when we rode them? It seems like the 9R obviously has a lot of torque and bottom end power, and then the boost has all the power you ever need. So you're kind of leaning a little more forward the whole time you're riding it. Just to the front end just feels light. It feels lighter than previous years with that track on it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's snow conditions, but that, like you said, that track gets up on top of the snow and really, it moves forward. So I think
I felt the same thing because I went and rode our 2023 Khaos Boost, which is a 165 with the 275 track. And we had a guy up there that was riding his Lynx 3900 Turbo, just a DS. And we were talking about rider position, and he's like, I trying to explain to him, like, okay, if you go back and forth between a Polaris and a Skidoo, you got to be in a different position. Like, you can't just get on and do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think what you're saying is right. You get on the 3.25 inch 24 Polarises, and you move forward more like you're on a Skidoo. My typical riding position on an Expert is my feet are probably 3 inches farther forward than they're going to be on a Pro, on a Polaris.
Right.
But yeah, the 24, you constantly felt yourself like adjusting forward just to kind of manage the front end a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because that track hooks up and goes, and it didn't feel like it trenched, right? Did it trench on you guys?
It didn't feel like it at all.
the snow conditions we were in, I didn't feel it at all.
Yeah.
Like,
Felt to me like it came right up on top, and of course when you get the nose in the air, I mean, you could start to feel like that rear end's going. But like you said, rather than just sinking in, and I mean, you're moving forward. So I don't know.
Do you remember the 3-inch on the Axis when that first came out?
Yeah.
With the chain drive.
Yep,
And
that's what mine was.
That thing would trench like crazy.
Yeah.
Did it go down?
I still remember Rhett and I riding one day, and I got stuck over and over and over again. Just weird tight tree spots. Maybe there was a log trying to go up over that, so you'd slow down for a minute, grab a handful, and I mean it was just, and that you were done. It was weird.
But
really
the
didn't like
2.6
it.
track wouldn't do that.
No.
It would lift and it'd get up on top of snow and drive, and then the 3-inch with the chain drive would sink. And then they came out with the Quick Drive 2, got rid of the chain drive, went to the Quick Drive 2 belt drive. And it's a little bit of a gearing change, so it gears it down effectively. But that helped. That helped with the trenching on the 3-inch track. So the track stayed the same. They changed the drive system, and it doesn't trench as bad.
Right.
But the 325 doesn't trench anything like the 3-inch did.
Yeah.
no, it's night and day different. I think it's overall better track all the way around. Just seemed like it I never felt anything like it sinking or trenching or anything like that. And that complements their tunnel, the slash matrix. So they go hand in hand, and they've taken a lot of material off the back of that and make it easier so the tunnel doesn't hang up, or nothing hangs up on the back of that snowmobile anymore. And now you have that track added to it, just less weight, and the track's light. It gets up on the snow well, doesn't trench at all. It's performance, like for those snow conditions. I don't like giving a set answer on a track or something new till you ride it in multiple conditions, because things perform different. Soft snow covers up and masks a lot of things that a snowmobile might do, and then you get in more set up spring snow, and the snowmobile reacts and acts different. So I want to ride it in a few different conditions and see how it is. But for the day we rode it, that track was impressive.
Yeah, I mean, for the conditions that we went in the other day, that's probably the conditions I would try to go ride in. So, so for me, like going back to their whole concept of maybe it's a purpose-built sled, purpose-built track. This idea that maybe it's for the guy that typically goes out on a deeper day. Maybe not for the guy that does a lot of spring riding. I thought they made that point pretty clear, and I think they're doing it for a couple of different reasons. One, I don't think they want to mislead people into thinking it's for everybody, but I think it's kind of cool that they've got options. And then if you really are a guy that just shoots for those deeper days, at least you have kind of a more purpose-built sled. We do the same thing with dirt bikes. The bikes we ride are kind of for where we like to ride. If I was riding somewhere else, I'd probably buy a different bike. So.
Yeah. And like when we talk to those guys, we ask them, why the difference, and he said the 275 is probably your all-terrain tire if you're comparing it to a vehicle, versus that 325 is purpose built, like you said, and maybe that's your mud terrain, your off-road tire. It's made for doing the thing you want to do. So it's impressive that they would spend the money and time to build a track like that.
So, Eddie, was there a downside to it? Because we started out, at least I always test the same way. I always get, when we go to these intros, we're riding next year's stuff, I always say, okay, where's this year's sled? I want to ride this year's sled first. And I'll try to start out the day and go all the way, whatever trail access point we got to do, get all the way into the hills, and then ride around a little bit on current model year stuff, or at least something comparable to current model year. And so I did that on this ride. I rode the 275 track on a 9R, rode that thing all the way in, got into the hills, and we started playing around. I stayed on it, did all my tree riding, just to kind of establish a baseline. So then I progress onto the next track. So I went from the 9R 155 275 track, and then jumped onto a 9R 155 3.25 track. And so then you can kind of isolate just the track change,
right.
And then you step up into a boost or 165 and kind of continue through that. But I could tell, that the 9R 175 felt like what we're used to this year, and kind of like what we were used to last year on the 850 with the 175. Very compliant, very predictable.
Yep.
It would lift when you wanted it to lift, and it would stay down when you wanted it to stay down, and really manageable. And so when I got on the 325 track, it immediately hooked up like 30% better.
Yeah.
If I've got to throw a number at it, I don't
Right.
know. If you've got to quantify this stuff, it's
Right.
30% better. Like a significant increase in traction. But on the downside, like I was touching on earlier, it requires more upper body strength and endurance.
A little more input.
It's kind of like going, from an NA to a turbo. Everything just is. It's more fun. It's definitely more fun.
Yeah.
Definitely it's the track I would take, but just be prepared to spend a little more energy. Like Cardi B wore me out. Like
Yeah.
that thing was. I tried and I tried to see what that thing would do and tried to dig that track down, and it honestly wouldn't. You couldn't get it to sink into the snow very well.
Yeah.
It would lift, and it wanted to get up on top and go. And if you didn't let it get up on top and go, it would stand straight up. And if you didn't let off, it would just come all the way back around.
Right.
Like I was sitting there thinking, well, I'm pretty good. I've seen Brent do this.
We were trying to figure out who was riding who.
No, definitely was not me. I was not in control on that one.
Cardi tried to come around and give you a kiss.
No, it did. Like that front bumper, tapped my visor.
I was gonna say it was about 2 inches in front of you. So.
Well, that's a weird feeling, to be standing there, and you know what's happening, so you just take a couple steps back. Because if you're down in the trench, you have a hard time getting off to the side. And that's the last thing you want to do is stand the thing straight up and down. You always want to be angled.
Yeah.
But if it does, and then you take a step back, and that front bumper just goes like right in front of you, you're just standing there watching it. But it's like, holy cow! Like the effort that it took to get it to do that was so much less than any other sled I've messed around on and standing it up. And we're on an incline, but not anything crazy steep.
Right.
And just that just shows you the power of the boost for one.
Yeah.
But you put that much traction under a boost, and it was pretty mind blowing. Like it was very impressive.
Yeah, with the Khaos setup, and I think it was it Josh that was running around in that same little meadow, and so you got Ryan just wheeling left and right and flipping all over, and here's Josh just hooting and hollering and screaming. He's having so much fun doing the same thing, just nose in the air everywhere he goes.
Man.
And so I mean, you can tell from making riding fun. I mean, like you said, a lot more input. A lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more input or a lot more effort, but you're definitely gonna. It's more of a workout for sure than just your standard track length, and of course the boost, and so. But
it was interesting watching the Polaris guys up there with us. We've been on some rides, and some guys will stop and watch your ride, and then when you stop, they ask your opinion and ask you what you think. But once we kind of got past that point, like later, they were all jumping on the boosts and the 9Rs and just having a riot. Like they were riding as hard and as much as we were.
yeah, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, they were enjoying themselves for sure.
Yeah.
So let's talk a minute about Pro versus Chaos, especially with that 3¼ inch track. Because again, you've the last 2 years, well, since Chaos came out, they've had two different rail profiles. So the approach angle has been a little bit different, and the Chaos has had a little bit different rail profile, which has pushed the center shock of the rear suspension down into the snow to give it more of a pivot point. So now they've gone, so that was 4 degrees difference between the Pro and the Chaos rail on that tip-up angle. Now they've gone right in the middle, and they have one rail. So the Pro got a little more happy, and the Chaos got a little more mild to meet in the middle right there. I don't think it's enough of a difference anybody's going to really feel it, but it allows them to build just one rail. But to me, with the 3¼ inch track, the Pro felt more like a Chaos. Right, because you could use the throttle and the traction to pull the front end up, but it would still track straight if you were just kind of modulating the throttle.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think previous years, previous model years, the Pro RMKs felt planted, like the front ends felt planted, felt like the skis were just, down on the snow, and the Chaos was, skis up in the air and way more playful. Seems like it kind of balanced the two for the better.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think we made that comment while we were out on the snow, like that track almost, I think between the track on the Pro, kind of just brought it just a little bit closer to what you would expect out of the Chaos, but not quite there. So I think you still have a little bit of that grounded, planted feel for somebody that likes that Pro platform better. But it definitely changed it just a little bit. I wouldn't say anything bad. In fact, I thought it was an improvement for me.
Yeah, I think it made the Pro a better sled.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm in the same category as you. I think the Pro was a little too planted, and it's definitely a good sled if you just want access. You don't want anything messing up your ride or making it difficult or making handling hard. The Chaos is more of a fun sled if you're looking for that. But if you are not looking for that and you don't want anything to do with that, the Pro is just dialed to just go straight across the side hill and stay on top of the snow.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they meant to do that, or if that track just kind of turned that Pro into a little bit more playful, a little bit lighter on the front end, but I think it's definitely improved the Pro's performance.
So do you think the riding style, because is it just me, or does it seem like mountain riders as a whole are moving away from the big gnarly terrain back into riding into zones and playing? Like we're getting off of the high exposure, high consequence, very dangerous stuff. I mean, we're still accessing that, but not like that wasn't like that isn't the destination anymore. It used to be go in and find the gnarliest, nasty stuff you can find. And now it seems like maybe it's social media effect, I don't know. Everybody's kind of just looking for play zones and finding a good hillside with lots of trees, the angle's just right, not high heavy danger.
Right.
And just watching each other play around, kind of like the Cardi B experience, what we were doing, that zone right there, like riding in, finding that, and just enjoying yourself for a couple hours.
I think one of you two mentioned it while we were up there. I think it was you, Ryan. He said, we could come in here and just do this all day long. This is fun. And that's what snowmobile should be about, is just having fun. I think the big open stuff you're talking about and the steepness of it and the risk with avalanche, I think it's got people's attention. There's been some big names pass away in the recent years, and I think it's more fun to just go play in a canyon, and that's where I like to go. You go find a creek bottom that's not high risk area. It's fun to play in. You find a nice side hill to play in, and that's what I enjoy. And I think when it comes down to it, are you having fun while you're doing it? Not everybody enjoys going straight up a steep mountain, but not everybody enjoys tree riding either. So
yeah, it's hard to speak for everybody because everybody has different riding styles, and maybe it's just because I'm getting old. but I, the high consequence stuff, with some like you said, some of the recent things that have happened with avalanche danger, and then just trying to be more aware. I had had all the fun I could have. I mean, it was great. We were completely wore out, and we had trees. We had open areas still that were fun to play in if you just wanted to mess around. We had some jumps, and I mean, I think you can find so much good riding in those type of zones. So yeah, for me, that's my ideal day of riding, just not having to worry about whether or not the mountain's coming down on you all the time. So, and I do think people are moving away from that a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. And I don't know if it's, I don't know. So I don't know if the manufacturers are responding to that intentionally, driving it back into more of a playful thing. But it seems like the equipment is going that direction. Granted, that Boost 165 with 3 1/4 inch track will climb anything. Like when the ridge we were on, if you kept going up through the trees, nothing was slowing that thing down.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it was just getting steeper and steeper. Like I did one long pull, and I had to give because I'm like, I can't get my weight farther forward. Like I can't get the nose back onto the snow to keep going uphill. Like I don't know what's going to happen here. It's like flipping all the way around on a swing set. It's like
Yeah.
it's like what point am I going to do that? But the thing would climb like a monster. But I would have more fun just back down the hill a little bit in the trees, just playing around like we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny you said that, because I know on the last little bit we were playing there, I kept ripping up through that one section, and I was on the Boost 165 with the 3.25, and as I was headed up through the hills, I'm like sitting here and the nose is coming up in the air, and like it always is on that sled. And then I realized that I was only about 3/4 throttle, so I hammered down a little bit more, and sure enough, the front end just lifted. So I mean, just super fun. I think that was my favorite sled of the day for sure. So go anywhere type sled.
Yeah. So talk about 9R 3 1/4 inch track 155 versus 165 on a Khaos. So what did you notice difference between 55 and 65?
When we talked about the Khaos 155, I mean, it definitely was more playful than the 165. And I don't know, are you thinking 9R boost or?
Yeah, just 9R, like just track length. So 55. So take the 3 1/4 inch track and just go 55 to 65. How big of a difference did you feel? And then compare that to like current model year stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that the 155, just like you would expect, a little bit more playful. Nose comes up a little faster. It comes around a little bit quicker. As far as the differences between the new 24s and the older model years, I think just how quick it came up on the snow and how much forward propulsion you had, in my mind. So.
Yeah, just more traction compared to last year, previous models. As far as 2024, 155 to 165 on the 9R. They're comparable to previous model year, the 275. A little more performance climbing versus playfulness of the snowmobile. I really like the Matrix Lash chassis, paired with that 9R. That motor just runs good. For tree riding, I love that snowmobile. If you're just side hilling, I think 165 is more forgiving, like we talked about earlier. But that 155 is just a good all-around snowmobile. It's fun to ride. It performs. I really enjoy that sled.
Yeah, I did spend a little bit of time kind of toward the end of the day on the 165 9R, and I had just come off a 155, and it was kind of interesting. I did notice. I mean, I guess if I was comparing it to this year's sleds, it felt a lot like this year's 165. I mean, I think it was a little. We were kind of playing a little metal with a little bit of a side hill. It was just easy to cut across it. If you got on the throttle, the front end came up a little bit, and just easy to ride, but a lot of control, I think, with that 165 9R. So.
Yeah, it seems like the 2024. We touched on this earlier in the show, but the 155 2024 with that 3 1/4 inch track feels like this year's 146. And next year's 165 with the 3 1/4 inch track feels like this year's 155.
Yeah, that'd be fair.
And so I don't know, like would you make that jump? Like if you're a 155 guy for the last couple of years, are you going to get a 165 next year because it feels more similar, or would you be better off with a 165 27 or a 155 275 track? Now, in what scenario do you pick the 175 over the 3 1/4?
275, you mean?
275, yeah. Sorry. Too many numbers. math was. I'm a journalist because math was not my thing.
I don't know. Part of that, I guess that'd be hard. In the 9R, I think I would maybe go with a 155. In the boost, I think I go with a 165. Just to not wear myself out so fast.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. We all experienced that sled, and just it's so fun.
It was fun
for about 15 minutes, and then it's like, okay, somebody throw me a life preserver here. Like I can't keep the front end down.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. It was fun. Probably one of the funnest sleds I've ridden, But I think just for me and everyday riding, I probably would go to the 165 still in the boost. So
does it change? Does that track change your opinion of what you would take 9R versus boost?
I wouldn't say. I don't know that the track would. Probably what would change my mind with the 9R and the boost was just the performance of the boost this year.
So did you talk? That's a good point, because on the mountain we were talking about, okay, this 2024 boost feels definitely better than the 2022 boost.
Right.
And then Brock and I rode our 23 production boost this week, and the 23 felt way better than the 22 that we tested. So they're making progress there, and the progress that we felt, the difference that we felt mainly was clutching and a little bit of fueling. There's less lag, there's not such a harsh transition, and the power comes on a little bit lower in the range.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think on 24, some of the calibration, they didn't really mention it doing anything else, but I'm sure they played with it. But that 24 boost felt great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I felt bad in 22 when we talked about the boost. People were like, what do you think? And I was having a hard time saying I loved it. I was like, okay, well, you grab a handful, and it seemed like you waited a minute, and it wasn't even really a turbo lag as much as it just was kind of like not quite engaging at the right time, or
a lot of top end power.
Yeah, a lot of top end. Yeah, once you got going, I mean, it was just ripping. But it's kind of that in between that if you're going to play in the trees in those zones where we were at, you'd want a little bit more on the bottom end. And so whatever they did, whatever calibrations they did to adjust or change that, definitely made a big difference. So
yeah, I think from between 22, 23, 24, it's the rideability of the sled has gotten better as far as performance on the boost. It's made it so the power's not all top end. Like the 22 felt like it was just all on top. Like it just seemed like all the power was just to go hit the biggest, wide open hill and hold it to the bar. And it made it more difficult to tree ride that sled in 22. 23, like you said, it felt a little bit better, but the 24 just feels like it's more rideable. Like it just feels like the power has moved, and whether that's clutching or fueling, like you said, I think it's a better package.
Yeah, and on the 22 boost, you could feel the weight of the turbo because there's mounts off to the side a little bit, so you could definitely feel the 20-some-odd pound difference. And then you go to the 23 that we rode this week, and then the 24 that we were on, and you don't feel the weight as much, and I think it's because it's just a cleaner transition into the power.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to explain it. Like it's more about that low end to that turbo transition. Like I don't know, it's hard to explain. You can just tell that you come into it a little bit better. It was so weird before, but kudos to them for doing whatever they needed to do to clean that up, because I was impressed with how well it worked even in low speed stuff, and then of course when you really got on it, it was super impressive. I don't know, felt maybe even a little more powerful just overall. I don't know if that's just because of where it engaged differently, but yeah, transition is probably a great way to say that, because that really is how it. Where I noticed the most.
We used to do the best way we could describe Skidoo turbo versus Polaris turbo for the last couple of years was Skidoo was a mid to bottom, or bottom to mid boost.
Yep.
Had great tree riding power. A lot. If your ground speed is slower, you feel a lot more of the turbo on the Skidoo.
Yeah.
If your ground speed is higher, you're more mid to top than the 22 boost anyway. rode really well like that.
Yeah.
But the 23 and the 24 feels like they've bridged that gap, and it's much more of a mid-range power and much more rideable, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So 24, model year 24, like you ordered a 9R this year, right? I was a 9R guy. In fact, I was the 9R best sled in the industry for the mountains until the prices came out. I think it should have been cheaper. It should have been priced in between the 850 and the Boost, not with the Boost.
Yeah.
I think that to me kind of took the edge off of the appeal of the 9R.
Yeah.
But I think it's the best all-around sled. But going into next year, what does that track do to that? Does the track for you make the Boost more appealing or the 9R more appealing?
I don't know. After spending time on that Boost, it's funny because riding the whole time, I'm like, oh no, now I need a Boost with the 3.25 track, and so
Well, you got to get your 23 first.
And I do love the 9R. I love that motor. I think I love the way it runs and just the way it engages and the way it rides. I mean, it's phenomenal. I don't want to take anything away from that. I don't know. There was just something about how fun the Boosts were in those snow conditions. I mean, that was, I think, ideal for the Boost.
Yeah,
so.
ideal, and that's key. When we were riding in Island Park 2 days ago, and the snow, you could find soft snow, but it was pretty hammered out. Island Park everything gets tracked up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so when you're on firm snow, man, you feel the weight of those sleds.
Yeah.
We were on that Khaos Boost. We were on the Lynx Shredder DS Boost, Turbo R, and that thing's quite a bit heavier. That's a heavy sled, quite a bit heavier than an Expert. And then we had an Expert 165 Turbo R. Mm-hmm. And if the snow's not ideal, a turbo is a heavy sled.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, going back to some of the riding that we did that day when I got back on the 9R 165, I mean, it's one of those sleds. There's plenty of power. The motor runs good. The track hooks up well. That 3.25 was awesome. And so, I mean, that truly, to me, and that was in the Pro chassis, was just a really easy sled to ride. Again, going back to what I've always loved about the Polaris, I can point and go anywhere I want to and be really confident in that. And that's how that sled felt. So yeah, the Boost is a little funner. I do worry about that. Different snow conditions, harder snow conditions. Would you love the Boost then, or would it be too much or a little bit out of control? So
I do remember you coming down and stopping a few times and being like, man, I love this Boost.
Yeah.
Like, you said it multiple times.
Yeah, which is funny because I always say I don't know if I'd want a turbo, but that changed my mind.
That's my thing, man. In those conditions, every sled feels light.
Yeah,
but
that's
around
true.
Here, man, we get a lot of days in the season where you don't have those conditions.
That's true.
So if you're a Colorado guy, if you're a BC guy, and you've just got champagne snow all the time, I'm Boost all the way.
Yeah,
no questions asked. But for the crap we get in Idaho, we got a few good days, and then we probably have 3 deep powder days for every 7 to 10 hard firm days. Generally, early in the season it's great, and then you got kind of a dry spell and everything gets firm, and then late spring is just phenomenal deep stuff.
Yeah.
Overall, if I'm picking one, I'm probably going to go for a 9R if I'm around here, just because if I average everything out, I don't want to fight a Boost on the firm days, and a 9R is good enough on the deep powder days. That's probably my one sled. I don't know yet on that 3.25 inch track if I'm going 155 or 165.
Yeah.
Probably 55.
In a 9R?
Yeah, in a 9R. But man, it wouldn't take much to get me to go to a Boost. Although if I'm doing a Boost, it's a 165.
Yeah.
I have lost that battle. that 55 was a blast, but it takes a more talented rider.
You just need to talk one of your friends into getting the 155 so you can ride it for 15 minutes.
Yeah, there you go.
And he wouldn't have any energy for the 165 he's riding back.
Yeah, you got to do group buys. Yeah, you go out, you buy 3 165s and 1 155, and then everybody just trades. Yeah, and I'm sure people are just thinking, "Oh, you guys are wusses. You can't ride a 155 turbo." Wait until you get on that thing next year in some deep snow. It is not anything you've ridden to date.
Yeah, it was different, and it was fun, and I'm sure you get used to it after a while, but it was surprising. It was wild.
Yeah. And you can manage it. Definitely, we're doing things to make it harder to ride.
Right.
But holy cow, if you use the power and the traction is there, that sled is wild.
Yeah, it was fun.
I think it's the way that we were all riding it, or watching you play around on it and wheeling up the hill. So the first thing we do when we jump on it is turn uphill and hammer down and lean back and let it wheelie
Well,
up
you
the hill.
can't ride it with the skis on the ground. So,
Yeah.
But I mean, you're holding it wide open, just laughing as you're wheeling up the hill. But I mean, you can change riding style. I think we were just trying to see the performance of the track, with the boost, and then watching you and laughing. I was like, I got to get on that thing.
Well, if you think you're getting on a Khaos 155 boost with that track and keeping skis on the ground at all, you might as well get a 650 RMK
yeah.
because that's the speed you're going to be going to keep the skis on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to learn how to ride on the rear axle,
Yeah.
which is fun. Like there's something to be said for that. Like it's a totally different riding style,
Yeah.
and it's a blast. Just
Yeah, it was
wheeling
way
through
fun.
crap.
It was way fun. I mean, they're still rideable. I guess I was on the 165 boost, but I went up through some tighter trees and, of course, no thought whatsoever of getting stuck because you just know you're not. But it was still manageable up through the trees. But yeah, if you grab a handful and you're going up through the trees, you better be ready for the front end to come up through the trees. So I still think they're. I wouldn't say the boost isn't rideable, but definitely the combination of the Khaos, the 155, and the boost is a much wilder ride than
And the track.
than some. Yeah, and then that three and a quarter track.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and
it
it's crazy what the traction allows you to do as far as changing your direction and how quickly you can change versus like a 175. You would see a line, you want to change your direction and go to a different line, and you know that the process involves forcing the tunnel down and the track's going to wash, and that's part of my turn.
right.
But on this 3 1/4, it's just throttle, stand up, twist, drop. Like it's a different application, different ride, and it's fun. So the 165 definitely takes the edge out of that. A little more mellow and overall easier sled to ride.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Jury's out on that one. Which way to go there?
Yeah, I did though. I told Rhett several times. I kept coming back down. I'm like, I love this. And I mean, we were just in a fun zone. So you go up, steep climb, turn, head up through the trees, and you could do the whole thing with the skis in the air on that 165 even. And it was a lot of fun. So
So what do you tell your buddies or somebody you run into that you've ridden one of these once the embargo was lifted that when they ask you which one did you buy, what do you tell them?
God, that's tough. I'm probably. I would say if I'm doing a 9R, I'm going to go 155, 3 1/4 track. If I'm doing a boost, it's definitely going to be a Khaos. I'm not a pro. I'm not a fan of a pro. It's a great, like we said, great sled for predictability and tractability. I think it's a little older generation anymore. For what I want to do, I want the Khaos. And if I do a Khaos boost with that track, I think I have to do a 165 because it's still so playful. But if I ride a 155, I'm just going to be scared to death everywhere I go.
yeah, I think your first question for your friend is, have you ever heard of Cardi B? And then maybe you can determine, what they should be riding.
But it's kind of fun being able to help you with this, the last however many years, and people will start to ask you your opinion on things, and you start to tell them one thing, and then you think of another thing on another sled, and you're like, well, I just, you have to ask them, where do you ride and where do you spend all your time riding before you suggest what they should ride. If comparing these two, the 9R versus the boost, whatever track length, I think if you're a tree rider and that's where you spend 90% of your time, I think the 9R is the way to go, whether you're a 155 or 65 guy.
And pro or Khaos?
It's personal preference how people like to ride. I when the Khaos first came out, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. I think it's a lot better now.
It took them a year to dial it.
I think now, like Ryan said, I'd take the Khaos over the Pro RMK. So, but if you're tree riding, that's where you spend the majority of your time, no matter the snow conditions. I think that 9R is the way to go. If you're all about climbing hills, and you vary where you're riding, and fun factor, maybe the boost is what you suggest to them. I did like the place you were talking about, going down and turning up, and we'd climb up through that kind of open area. And I did that quite a few times on 2 different boosts, 2 different track lengths, and you're gaining speed all the way up that hill. As fast as you want to go. Like, it's not a problem. And then I jumped on the 9R 155 and did the same thing, and would try to cut fresh lines every time. And you're still climbing, but the speed is not there like the boost. Like, the boost is just so much faster. So when you're riding turboed sleds, you have to react faster. You have to look ahead farther when you're riding. Pay attention to what's coming, because it's coming faster. Not that the 9R is a slouch. Like, it goes and performs just like you want it to. But after you spend a bunch of time on a boost and get on a 9R, it feels slow. But then when you start taking those 2 sleds in the trees, if you're spending all your time in the trees and you're, side hill and back and forth or whatever you're doing, after you ride them both for a while, spend a lot of time on a boost, get on the 9R, and then get back on the boost feels heavy compared to the 9R. The 9R just feels light.
And that's where I think a lot of it comes down to, when you have somebody come and ask you, if they're a turbo rider and they come ask you, should I get a 9R or should I get a boost? It's like, well, if you're a turbo guy, you're not going to like the 9R because it doesn't have that pull.
Right.
But if you get into the trees and you really like riding, like you really like making the sled do things rather than just hanging on and squeezing the throttle and standing it up. If you like riding and technical riding and doing hard things, the 9R, you can't do things on the boost that you can do on the 9R. I mean, maybe Keith and Andy Thomas and some of these guys can, but the average guy will be able to do more things on a 9R in technical stuff. But if you're a turbo guy, you've been a turbo guy for a long time, and you don't care about tight technical terrain, you've got to tell them a boost. It's just too big of a difference.
Yeah. Both still fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So which one are you taking overall? Based on this one test session that we've had. Obviously, by the time this comes out, we'll have been on it for another week. But
I still think I'd go with the 165 boost
in the Khaos,
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
with the new track, like
with the
in any scenario, are you doing the 275?
I think so. Yeah,
So
any
you're
more
325.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, any more with the limited number of days I can find to actually get out on snow, we're going to pick better days, and I'd like to have the 3.25. So I love the 275. It's a phenomenal track, and I wouldn't say the ones that we rode the other day ran amazing. They went through the snow well, but there was just a little bit of a fun factor that came with that 3.25, and like you said, going back to propulsion and how well it comes up out of the snow, it was impressive. So I don't know that we spend as many days in hard snow or late spring stuff. So I guess in my mind that'd be the best track for me. So
What are you doing?
I don't know. I think progression with tracks is key there. I loved the 2.6. I love the 2.75. I didn't care for the 3-inch. And then obviously this new track, it does what the previous tracks did well, but now it's even more traction. So I'd go with that track if I was buying one. As far as which sled, I think with that much traction, kind of changes on the sleds, I think I'd go 155 on the 9R. If I was taking a boost, I'd be torn. Just the fun factor of the 155 boost, it's so fun. But I obviously I go Khaos, but I'd be torn between a 155 and 65 in the boost. I think the 65 would be way more forgiving, but the fun factor of that 155, you dubbed Cardi B. That thing was so fun.
Yeah, and I agree. I just don't know if I could ride that thing the entire ride, especially on, some of the other harder rides that you do with, like, the rides you do with Rob and Dave.
right.
I don't know if I want to be on that 155 boost for the whole day in that condition. One thing I was thinking of, though, like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Pro. I'd rather have a Khaos, but the Pro 155 boost was a good sled, because it kept the front end down, but it was still pretty lively. So that's something to consider. Like maybe there is a better spot for a pro if you want a lively sled here. But
Yeah, and I think when we've talked about like Skidoo before, and some of the difficulty with riding a Skidoo is it really is. I've always thought of it as really playful, and I know a lot of guys that just, especially younger guys, that love that playfulness. They always want the front end in the air and all over. So it really does, I think, come back to riding style. I mean, do you want the front end in the air all day long and be able to kind of lift and maneuver it, or do you want to be planted? And that's probably the biggest difference, I think, so between those two.
yep.
Maybe that's where the manufacturer's coming from, making more playful sleds. It's a generational thing. Younger kids want more playful sled versus our dads to us. I think it's really cool at our age where snowmobiles have come from and gotten to. Like, just in the time that, what we were riding as kids versus now. Like, we've seen a huge progression versus what maybe our dads saw at the same time frame, from 10 to 40, versus kids. 5 years ago, when somebody asks you what's next for snowmobiles, you're like, I don't know, how do they get better? And then somebody asks you that last year after you ride some new turbo that's lighter weight and more traction, how do they get better? Where do you go from that? So I think, for our age group, we've seen a huge progression from what snowmobiles were, from riding a TXL 340 or a Jag 440, when I was 10 to what we have now. It's cool to see the progression and how much things have changed.
Yeah. That's a funny point. Yeah. My son is only, we've all ridden trailing arm sleds and sleds with seats that were bigger than modern mountain sleds completely now. Like, and stuff where the handlebars only, were barely above your kneecaps. Like, like the younger riders just haven't really experienced that spectrum, but at the same time, so what?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, 10, 20 years from now, they'll have
Yeah.
something different and look back on what we rode. So.
Yeah. But yeah, my son's only known like Summit Experts and Pro RMKs and stuff like that. And it's you want to show him like, okay, here's an old XLT, like go ride this. But again, it's like, what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
It's all perspective.
Right. Right. It was the best that we had then. So.
Yeah.
We couldn't know any different.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, we'll be back on these again for another week before embargo lifts, but we'll have Brock and Bruce on with them. So we'll shoot another show and talk about these again with everybody, but that'll allow us to also talk about 24 Skidoo and Arctic Cat and Lynx and Yamaha and see what they've got. But we wanted to shoot this one just a couple days after we rode these for the first time in January and just get everything while it's fresh and talk about that ride and experiences. So that's that, and yeah, we'll hit more 2024 stuff as we get on them. But, all right, thanks for listening, guys.